I'm going to talk about the psychology of this moment that we're in, and I'm going to blow through a lot in the interest of time. But I hope that folks can at least use the contours for further discussion and organizing. I'm going to start by stating what I believe is driving Israel at this moment. And to do that, you have to understand or at least be attuned to Israeli internal discourse over the years. In general, there has been a persistent lament in Israeli society at all levels and across the full spectrum of their social, economic, political, academic, professional, and religious lives that deeply, deeply regrets the fact that Ben Gurion did not, quote, finish the job. And this lament has continued to be echoed in subsequent so-called missed opportunities to fully ethnically cleanse the land and effectuate the Zionist dream of greater Israel and further colonial imperial expansion into more Arab lands. And one of the things that underpins this regret in Israeli society is the fact that history has proven to them that no matter how badly they behave, how barbaric and cruel they are, and no matter how much pressure they feel in the moment, their propaganda will eventually wash away their crimes, that people will move on and they forget. And that's what they count on. That's what they're counting on in this moment. And these are lessons that they have internalized from experience of getting away with atrocities over and over and over. And now they're pushing through what they believe is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to steal prime land that comes with a vast natural gas resource worth trillions of dollars and to simultaneously obliterate the indigenous Palestinian population that they've been trying to get rid of for 75 years. Netanyahu is at the tail end of his life, and he knows that it's now or never. So decades of experience tell them that the world's condemnations right now are meaningless, that they can do whatever they want, and when the dust settles, they'll just pour money into new PR campaigns. Their stenographers at the New York Times and other major outlets will reframe history. They'll buy new politicians. They'll put out dozens more Hollywood films and television series that overtly and subconsciously exonerate them and paint their victims as villains. And they'll indoctrinate a whole new generation that will not remember or care about this horrific moment in history, as they have done in the past. And that's what they're counting on. And they're counting on all of you, on all of us, to remain paralyzed, to be floundering in this theater of words and performances of concern. So no matter the amount of our protests, nothing is going to deter this genocidal Jewish supremacist death machine ultimately, unless it has real teeth. And the past 2 years have already proven that. We have watched the absolute catastrophic failure of every peaceful, every diplomatic, every legal avenue, all of which have been deliberately sabotaged by Israel and the United States. And so now inaction is not neutrality. It is not diplomacy. It is not self-preservation. It is complicity. It is surrender of your agency as peoples, as nations. It is a subordination of your moral compass and your very humanity to a fleeting political expediency. And eventually, your inaction now will prove to be your subjugation and perhaps destruction in times to come. Colombian President Gustavo Petro understands this. He recognized this and he summarized the implication of this moment perfectly. He said, Gaza is a rehearsal of the future. He said it is a preview of how powerful nations will respond to challenges from less powerful ones, particularly in the global south. He said the Holocaust in Gaza is an experiment carried out by rich, great powers to demonstrate what they will do and what they will get away with against anyone who refuses to bend to their will or relinquish whatever they demand. Nothing Israel does is random. In collaboration with Europe and the United States and sycophantic Arab leaders, their behavior is calculated to a T, and it adjusts according to scientifically studied and theorized psychological models of control, corruption, colonization, and subjugation. The methods that are used to subjugate and control lions and other powerful forms of life for circuses are not very different than what they employ to subdue and break whole nations and whole societies. When you become familiar with psychological concepts like learned helplessness, the boiling frog principle, the schoolyard bully phenomenon, and the bystander effect, the reality that we are in will crystallize for you in the fullness of their nefariousness. We don't have a whole lot of time to delve into these, but I want to touch on them very briefly because I think you will recognize, you will see ourselves and you'll see the world reflected in them. Learned helplessness emerged from these cruel electric shock experiments that were conducted on animals, wherein the animal is programmed to believe that no matter what they do, whether they run, protest, beg, cry, nothing will stop the painful shock from ripping through their bodies until the animal just lays there and takes it, one blow after another, after another, after another, normalizing this horrific violence. Israel follows this to a T. They commit a heinous crime, they watch the shock and outrage from the global public, and then they follow it up with an even greater crime. And the end result is an exhausted world that begins to believe that nothing we do, no matter how hard we try, how passionately we believe, that we are powerless to materially change the outcomes. And thus the overwhelming violence becomes normalized and a sense of powerlessness is internalized. And I know I don't need to give you all examples. It's there for all to see. And the corollary to this concept of learned helplessness is the boiling frog principle. And I know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but basically, if you drop a frog into boiling water, the frog will jump out immediately. But if you put it in a pot of room temperature water and then slowly bring it to a boil, the frog will not perceive the danger and will eventually be cooked alive. This slow incremental escalation of violence is intentional, and it is calculated precisely to prevent what we're trying to do. It is calculated to prevent a collective breaking point that would trigger a unified fight response. Israel's occupation of Palestine has been a 75-year slow boil. So this brings me to the schoolyard bully phenomena that I know that you don't need that explained to you, but there are some hallmarks of this well-studied phenomenon in psychology. The bully intentionally escalates in stages and increments to avoid triggering a massive unified resistance, which is what we're trying to do here. The bully aims to inspire fear and seek dominance by targeting the most vulnerable and maximizing cruelty where resistance is least likely. We see this in Israel's specific targeting of children and unarmed, defenseless people. We see it in the pogroms committed by Israeli settlers backed by soldiers against whole families. And of course, we see a completely different behavior from them when someone is actually able to fight back, like Iran. The bully escalates their violence not just to maintain dominance, but also to push the limits farther and farther every time they get away with something. And they will never be content until someone stronger or a unified group finally stands up to them in a meaningful way. We see this play out over and over with Israel. They're caught doing the unthinkable, condemnation follows, and then they respond by doing something even more unthinkable. And the point is to make it clear to all of us that no matter how much you protest, we will do worse. We will cross all your red lines, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then another hallmark is to gaslight and blame the victims. And this also needs no examples. We all know that, we all see it. And the point here is not to convince people, but to sow doubt among the global community and to psychologically break their victims and break their detractors. And then the final hallmark of the schoolyard bully is to reward compliance and obedience by refraining from targeting the obedient, at least until the bully changes his mind. And the point here is to teach the oppressed people that resistance leads to immediate and severe suffering, while submission will delay, or possibly, if you're lucky, omit your suffering, all at their whims. And, you know, we can see this happening in Lebanon and in Jordan in particular. And so this is where the other concept, the bystander effect, comes into play. This is a social psychological phenomenon that states that individuals are less likely to help a victim when other people are present. So basically, the responsibility to act becomes diffused. And on a global scale, we see this playing out where every country watches another country waiting for others to take action, and it creates a paralyzing feedback loop of inaction that the aggressor, that Israel, are crucially depend on. And so, of course, the Holocaust in Gaza is the most blatant example right now. The whole world is seeing the slaughter, the starvation, the inhumanity, the utter sadism. And they look to the United States, to the United Nations, which is completely neutered by the United States. Arab countries look to each other, and then collectively to the US and to Europe, and the rest of the world just hopes that by staying passive and not rocking the boat, that they're going to be spared Israel's wrath or political retribution from the US. And so each country is watching others do nothing, and that has their own inaction reinforced. So that's where we are now. And it looks bleak, it sounds bleak, and it is, but it is not, and it doesn't have to be the end of history. There is a way out, not just for Palestine, but for the whole of the moral majority of humanity to finally break free from the yoke of a colonial elite that has been playing chess with all of our lives in one way or another, forcing us all now to watch what our minds can scarcely comprehend. That is being violence that is being inflicted on a captive, defenseless, indigenous civilian society. And while Israel might be scandalized by the images that are coming out of Gaza, they want you and me to see them. This is the experiment. This is the programming of learned helplessness. The works of Frantz Fanon in this area are intellectually seismic events that are most relevant to this conversation right now and the decisions that must be had at this hour. He laid it out for us, that the most insidious shackles that bind us are those within our own minds, both as individuals and as nations. We are speaking, even now, this workshop, we're speaking within the confines and the contours that have been put in place by a tiny group of humans who have created this world order that none of us had a say in, a world order that rigidly divided us into civilized and savage, good and evil, first world and third world, advanced and emerging. This language is insidious, and it frames our thoughts and even our imaginations, and that's the point. Frantz Fanon offered us a pathway to respond in ways that are also undergirded by scientifically studied and theorized psychological models of national and personal liberation, of decolonization, and of triumph. He argued, and please hear this, every syllable of this very clearly, that decolonization must be a violent and collective rupture. This rupture is meant to shatter the individual hope, or the individual country's hope of mercy from the colonizer or the aggressor, and to replace that with a collective will to seize freedom, to seize agency, and to seize sovereignty. It is a path that forces us to recognize that our fates are tied together, that none of us will be spared, and that our only hope is in a unified resistance. Our collective anguish before this ongoing Holocaust at this hour that we are watching in the fullness of its gore must be a deeply personal exploration of what it means to be human in the world today, in a world that is shaped by oligarchs and sadists, corrupt leaders, and an unfathomable reenactment of the kind of naked colonialism that we all assumed was relegated to the past. A colonialism that is complete with mass slaughter, incomprehensible gore, and the total stripping of agency, of identity, of history, the utter destruction of an ancient indigenous society by foreign colonizers who came to our land with their Torah in one hand and grenades in the other, stealing and killing and raping their way through history. A history that they then rewrite and replace with fairy tales that they turn into school textbooks as if it's truth. They see this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, as I said, for them to consolidate unreasonable power. However, if we choose, this moment can actually be our once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for humanity to finally chart a just, kinder, more sustainable, more dignified human destiny for all of us. They put international law in place to serve their interests. I believe that. It's there to punish African and Arab leaders who stray too far from their political whims. It's there for leaders who dare to put their own interests of their people before the interests of this elite cabal. But when that system no longer serves them, as we are witnessing now, they just trash it like it's nothing. And they do that because it was always nothing for them. It was always meant to be a self-serving tool. And now they don't need it. They have artificial intelligence and they have death technology that no one dreamed of. They don't need the pretense anymore. Not as long as all of us remain compliant and paralyzed. And the only way this will end well for any of us is through solidarity and unified action, including economic, diplomatic, and most crucially, military action. It is only by matching their sadistic escalations with our own escalations of resistance, both in tactics and intensity. Fanon spoke of this, and the Palestinian resistance is a living example of what it means to refuse to live on your knees, to refuse to live in fear, to break the shackles of our minds, to escalate resistance whenever we can. They refuse to give in to exhaustion, hunger, fear, and threats, and overwhelming odds. But what's missing for them and for all of us is solidarity and unified action. So yes, we are asking we are asking countries to step in to save what little remains of Gaza and the rest of Palestine. But what you might not understand is that in doing so, you would be saving yourselves in the end as well.